Muted. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for the day, Dr. Manuel Gonzalez Canché, Associate Professor at the University of Pennsylvania, who will be presenting on the perils of machine learning in reproducing inequities, an application to risk models in FAFSA verification.
Thank you so much. By the way, wonderful pronunciation of my last name. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to be sharing the slides for my presentation, and also I'm going to share my screen right now. Let me see. So, can you all see that?
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. Let me just see if I can change my. Okay. Let's see. Perfect. Okay, so I think that we're ready. So welcome. Thank you so much for having me here. And I feel a little bit overwhelmed by the responsibility in the sense of wonderful presentations throughout the day, and it is tough to close this wonderful set of discussions that we have had. So without further ado, I'm just going to present some work in progress and published work where colleagues and I have relied on data science, machine learning, predictive analytics to basically to sort of kind of understand when policies have been implemented to reproduce inequities and when there are some unexpected consequences of those policies also to reproduce inequities. So just wanted to set up the presentation with some context. High dimensional data, also known as big data, are not new. What is newer is the computing power that fuels machine learning, artificial intelligence, to basically learn the intrinsicies and hidden patterns in those data. And with this set of algorithms, what we basically try to do is to assess the relationships that we observe in the current data, some sort of like internal validity. We actually learn what we gather data on. And in some instances that relates to external validity, what we do is we extrapolate outside of our data sets, our samples, these learned patterns, and apply them to basically different subset of the population, different samples, to estimate some predicted behaviors and outcomes or expected outcomes of participants. Machine learning, without any doubt, help us better understand patterns much more efficiently than what we can do with our human brains, particularly when we are talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of observations or data points. And probably this is going to be a little bit, well, it's going to create some comments and concerns. I truly believe that the algorithms per se are not biased, and this is a very strong and important assumption. As we will see in the closing of the presentation, I truly believe that what is typically biased is our samples and how we go about gathering those data, and how do we go about making predictions with those data. I think that that's where the main source of bias comes, not necessarily from the algorithms themselves. Again, important assumption. And the algorithms identify, study, learn, and predict impressively well. And this is truly impressive what they can do. And the main problem is that sometimes they do it a little bit too well. And I do have an example that I'm going to be discussing in a second. So this is a quite important and up-to-date example. This happened in some state in China. I'm not familiar where exactly. So this model um, suddenly received a notification from the government stating that she was jaywalking and that she was going to be fined. In China, now they have these social fines that, in addition of having to pay, there is some public ashamed. So people are ashamed in the trains or in the street, in the spectaculars. And she received this notification because she was crossing the street with the red light. So as you can see, what is happening now is that she is in advertising something, and the machine learning, the algorithm detected her face very impressively. The boss is moving, identify her features, find her. Find her. Uh, can we argue that the algorithm is biased in this case? I I will argue that the algorithm is impressive. I was actually in Beijing in 2019, and we were having dinner, and my hosts were not drinking at all. And I was surprised because I never saw any police car in Beijing nor Shanghai. And I asked them, so how come everybody is so respectful of not having even one beer while having dinner or something like that, or one drink? And they said that all those cameras that are on the street are detecting the tone of the color of the face, so they can actually detect when somebody has had any symptom of having had alcoholic beverage. And that is when the police cars come. So I would say that the algorithms are trained, they detect, and they send a signal. The problem is um, the data that is feeding those algorithms, in my perspective. So the algorithms learn, predict, reproduce. These algorithms perform well, but they also, in the social sciences where I work, they also account for the state of the world. And by the state of the world, what I'm referring is what are the data that these algorithms are analyzing. Once more, what are the data? We live in a truly and deeply stratified society. Accordingly, the data may come with over representations of this state. In going back to one of the concerns that my colleague and Mary Nunez was stating, these algorithms may indeed predict that underrepresented minoritized students are more likely to drop out, more likely to not continue. Unfortunately, that is representing the struggles that minoritized, underrepresented, low-income students are experiencing. The algorithms are detecting that and are sending triggers, signals, and people act on those signals to either not admit them, to either penalize them, uh, because they are once more accounting for the state of the world, unfortunately. So algorithms learn patterns, gaps, and tend to reproduce these initial conditions. I would say that for me, the more important questions will be, how can these tools, these algorithms, help us identify policies that reproduce inequities? How can these algorithms help us break these patterns? How can we start using these algorithms to actually do something good, not to reproduce the system? And I will briefly uh, present a couple of examples. In the first example, I would like to talk about how we can use data science, data visualization, predictive analytics to actually provide evidence that a policy is helping us reproduce inequities. And the second is to highlight how a policy may have been enacted purposefully to reproduce inequities. So in the first, this is going to be briefly because I have about 10 minutes. We have the two examples are about financial aid programs. One deals with this student loan interest deduction that I'm referring to as SLID. Overall, financial aid programs in the United States for college are very important. These represent about $26 billion per year. One of those programs is SLID, that consists of having of bringing or providing up to $2,500 as an earned income tax break for households who have interest on the student loan debt, accounts for about 50% of that amount per year, and represents about 45% of a program that is designed, Pell Grant program, that is designed to help lower income students to gain access to college. So I will argue that SLID is an expensive program, and it has been engineered to condition the benefit to those who attend college, to have loan debt to attend college, and also those who have higher magnitudes or higher amounts in these student loan debts that lead to interest generation. So this is data visualization of how income distribution or the income distribution according to IRS data across the contiguous United States. This is the income distribution of SLID also in the United States. So as you can see, it is quite similarly distributed. If we take a simple linear model to predict one observation using the other, we have that a 10% increase in income in a given zip code leads to a 13.5% increase in a SLID disbursement in the same zip code. So SLID distributions are concentrated in wealthier zones, and that is a given. And some may say, yeah, those higher zip codes also pay higher taxes, so they do deserve higher tax breaks. I would say that that is a faulty argument, because SLID is supposed to help the students who need the help to deal with the student loan debt. So if we go and analyze how are we expected to observe that the SLID is actually reaching students across different sectors and levels, what we found is that in the community college sector, which tends to help or to welcome lower income, minoritized, underserved students, first generation, all these students who need the help the most, about 75% of them are not qualifying for even receiving this benefit. And we are talking about 7 million students who are attended. 6.14 million students enrolled in the public four-year sector undergraduate level. 50% of them are not qualifying for this benefit. For even graduate students in the four-year sector, 1.6, also 50% of them are not even qualifying for this credit. So we are systematically excluding these students from this benefit. And we also know that, well, in this example, what we are doing in terms of predictive analytics is to spelling out who is not receiving these benefits. And we are providing evidence that this actual policy is actually engineered to not help those who need the aid the most. We know that those who are the most at risk of defaulting in their debt have about $5,000 in outstanding debt, and they are not being helped. by these type of policies. The second policy that I would like to briefly discuss is this one that is referred to as financial aid verification. Yeah, I have the time here. Thank you. So financial aid verification. Financial aid verification, this is a recent paper that my colleagues and I were able to publish, educational evaluation and policy analysis. This policy targets at-risk students to ask them to provide extra documentation because they may have provided wrong information when filling up this financial aid documentation. So the questions are, why are we selecting them? We are selecting them because we want to protect taxpayers. We don't want to waste taxpayers' money. And I would say this argument is kind of sort of ridiculous as well. We don't want to waste resources, like, for example, going constantly golfing or taking vacation trips to Florida. So that's how much we care about not wasting resources. And also on the how, the question that I have, and we are going to be close with this one, is a couple more slides, is financial, the office that is in charge of selecting these students has confirmed that most students are selected through a targeted selection process where there is a machine learning model that identifies students who may be providing wrong information. And the question is, we are feeding, not the question, the problem is that we are feeding these machine learning models to identify these students based on those students who qualify for the federal aid. And those students who qualify for the federal aid are those who have all the ingredients to be most at risk. Lower income, actually need the aid, first generation in college, etc., etc. So we are training the model to identify those students, and then we target those students to provide the extra information. I just want to share, probably you can see this. This is a post that discussed the paper that I was just showing. This is the National Association of Student Aid Administration. This post is to problematize what is wrong with the policy. So they were critical, and you can see that even people who are in charge, and this person, for example, mentioned has 23 years, 27 years as a financial aid officer or whatnot. He's saying how difficult it is for these kids to provide the information, even if they are selected for verification. Whenever we start analyzing case by case who these students are, how problematic their experiences at home are, having this extra barrier for them to qualify for money who they are entitled to may have devastating consequences. And they may experience what is known in the literature as verification melt, when, because they are selected for verification, even if they didn't provide wrong information, they just stop the attempts to enrolling in college. So I was going to discuss more about how the risk models are. You do have the presentation. What I wanted to say here is that if we train the data to, for example, identify dogs, this is a new project that Google started, well, in 2015. We can apply those algorithms and ask the algorithms to identify dogs even where there are not dogs, and the algorithm will identify and magnify the features that resemble dogs. The point being is, and with this I close, is we can train, if we change our mentality, we can train the algorithms to identify the students who need the help and did not provide wrong information, and identify them rather than trying to identify students who we assume provided the wrong information. So it's a shift of who do we want to identify, not about how negative the algorithms are in reproducing the system. Well, thank you, and looking forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzalez Canché. We have a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions coming in. First thing I want to ask is from an attendee.
I don't think I can hear you, sorry. Let me double check.
I'm going to read it out as well. This reminds me of student success apps, which basically encourage administrators to dissuade students away from hard disciplines if they may not be successful. This tends to discourage minoritized, students from going into STEM. Have you seen any analysis of this bias in the algorithms of those types of systems?
Could you please repeat the question? I had a little bit of trouble.
Yes, I will also copy and paste it for you in the chat right now. But it reads, this reminds me of student success apps, which basically encourage administrators to dissuade students away from difficult disciplines if they might not be successful. This tends to discourage minoritized students from going into STEM. Have you seen any analysis of this bias in the algorithms of those types of systems?
No, thank you. That's an excellent question. What I'm actually working on is, with this change of perspective, is to identify successful students who belong to minoritized groups and reverse the process of identifying similar students who may be interested in going into those disciplines and encourage them to apply rather than the other way around.
Sorry, I lost my mic for a second. Thank you so much for that. Another question is pertaining to an earlier part of your talk. It reads, you said that bad algorithms might not be so bad or biased themselves and are just biased based on the state of the world, but you also suggested that that might be a controversial view. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, so some people may believe that the designers of these algorithms are actually creating them to favor some groups over the others. And having studied these algorithms and having used them in my own research constantly, what I truly believe is that that with this open source, open freeware platform, where we can actually analyze all the steps that people are following to publish these algorithms, the likelihood of them being purposefully biased is very low. What I truly believe is that the data that are feeding those algorithms is what may be biased. Does that make sense? So there is like a trail that we can follow nowadays to actually assess whether there is an algorithm that is actually purposefully trying to reproduce the system.
That does make sense. Thank you. Another question that we got from attendees. Have you been able to study the algorithms employed in the College Board CSS profile financial aid program and compare them to the FAFSA's algorithms?
No, the College Board is very controversial, and I have been in some fights with them internally. There is no the same thing that I said about the openness in the open source free software data is non-existent in non-profit organizations like College Board, for example. It is not possible to study those algorithms as of now.
That gives me a lot to think about, some research that I will be doing. But thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Gonzalez Canché. I really appreciated getting to learn from you. And I know all of our attendees did as well. To all of our attendees, before I pivot to our closing remarks, I would like to announce the winners of our